Hello everyone, welcome to the Galactic Collaboration Summit. I'm Sesha. I'm a Principal Group Product Manager at Microsoft. In this session, I'm going to cover security and compliance in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. We will cover the agenda under 4 major topics: trends shaping the security landscape, new security controls that are helping you to your unique new challenges, the new compliance controls to meet your regulatory needs, and then we will finish with sharing with you the roadmap and a Q&A session as well. Let's start with the trends shaping the security landscape. As we all working from home, we actually expect that around 300 million global office workers are to be working from home actually. Now, this is now becoming the new norm. And when we asked CISOs and COOs, 40% of them indicate that information security is a primary risk from this COVID-19. However, 69% of them said employee health and safety is the key consideration for them. The threat landscape that we see is all around zero trust model. Gone are the days when you have to access your corporate data, VPNing to your IP network, having firewall protecting your corporate data, and so on. Nowadays, your employees expect to access your corporate data from anywhere, from any devices, from any different locations. As a security professionals, we do have challenges ahead of us. We do have to start embracing the strong user identity. In other words, multi-factor authentication. In lieu of devices, you need to start managing the devices because there is no longer firewall that's going to protect those corporate data. So you need to start managing the devices that the users are using. Not only that, even if the users come from their personal devices, access your corporate data, you want to make them productive, but at the same time ensure that your business critical data is not getting leaked. It all boils down to the core principle, least privileged access. Because employees expect to access their corporate data from anywhere, from any devices. That means when they access the data, you ensure that only the privilege they absolutely need is what's given in order to access the data. So that's in a nutshell what a zero trust model is. What are the security pivots and the controls that we have in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams? I would put them in 4 major security pivots. The first one is around users. In this case, both internal or external users, because typically you not only work with your colleagues in your organization, you also collaborate with external users and have them access to your corporate data as well. In order to maintain the security pyramid, you really need to embrace the multi-factor authentication. And as you know, Office 365 and Azure Active Directory already supports capability for enforcing multi-factor authentication for your users, be it internal users or external users. The other key policy that you want to keep in mind is sharing policies. Especially when you are bringing in external collaborators, you want to make sure appropriate external sharing policies are in place for your corporate data. Now let's go on to devices, both from a manageability of devices and personal devices. When the user is trying to access the corporate data, you need to bring in appropriate security policies. To manage the devices, mobile device management solutions such as Intune is the perfect match there. As an IT administrator, you can now manage the IT blessed devices, but at the same time, using fine-grained conditional access in SharePoint and OneDrive, you can now also allow from unmanaged devices access for those users, but at the same time, ensure if it is very business critical, high business critical content, like a top secret content, you block them access when they come from unmanaged devices. And then finally, when users access these corporate data from unmanaged devices, let's imagine somebody is accessing your corporate data from airport, from a shared device, and they're busy to catch their flight, and they forgot to sign out. In those cases where idle session timeout policy comes into play. As an administrator, you can configure how long you want that to be. Then it will automatically sign out that particular session. So that way, you are protecting your corporate data access from unauthorized hands. Let's go to the third pivot, which is around locations. You can configure IP address policy in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams such that only if users come from those IP addresses, you allow them access to your corporate data. Not only within the services, in Azure Active Directory, we have now integrated such that you can provide a unified IP address range in Azure Active Directory that will get honored across all the Microsoft 365 services as well. So that in a nutshell, across 3 pivots, what are different policies and controls that we have available in the service. The last pivot I want to focus on is information protection itself. Like how are we protecting the data that is sitting on your services? This one, I'm going to actually go a little bit more deeper around simplifying the information protection using sensitivity labels. I'm sure many of you are already aware of our journey in Microsoft information protection. We want to help you easily classify, detect, and label your ever-increasing digital data. These labels, you can associate richer security and access policies to them. And not only that, these policies are consistent across files, teams, SharePoint sites, and Office 365 groups as well. We call them unified labels across Microsoft 365. You define them in one location, which is M365 Compliance Center, and they consistently available for your end users across all the Microsoft 365 experiences, such as Office, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, or in Teams experience, or in SharePoint or OneDrive experiences as well. So let's actually take a look at it in a hands-on demo. Here I am in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. I'm logged in as a compliance admin for Contoso Bank Corp. Throughout my demos in this session, I'm going to act as the compliance administrator as well as an investment banker working at Contoso Bank Corp. Here, as the compliance admin, I have configured general, confidential, finance department, M&A, legal, top secret, and top secret as the sensitivity labels that are available for my enterprise users. Let's take a look at one of these sensitivity labels. Let's look at top secret. So here, if I let me go ahead and click on edit label, and I have selected the name, which is top secret. The important policy that I have configured here is encryption policy. As you can see, this top secret label allows only the Contoso Bank Corp employees to be able to access the files that are labeled as top secret. I'm able to configure that right here in the encryption policy. Second, I also have configured a content marking policy so that if a file got labeled as top secret, there is a watermark and header and footer saying top secret is getting added to the file as well. Then I also configured sites and group settings such that if this top secret label gets added to a team or a SharePoint site, these 3 policies will take effect. On privacy setting, it will be automatically set as private. As many of you know, the choices are private or public or none. So I'm setting for top secret label is always private. Second of all, external users access. I have this turned off. That means Office 365 group owners cannot add people from outside the organization for the top secret resources. It makes sense, right? And then also from a device policy perspective, from an unmanaged device policy, the fine-grained conditional access that I mentioned earlier, I have set it as block access. That means top secret sites or teams cannot be accessed from their personal devices. It makes sense too. Also, I can choose other options like limited access mode, which means people can access these sites and files only from the web. Or I can also allow full access. So these are the choices based on the sensitivity nature of the label I can select for the unmanaged devices. And that's it. I can go ahead and finish this setting for top secret. And similarly, I have the confidential label. The only difference here is for sites and group settings, I have configured it as private and allow limited access for web-only access. And there is no encryption policy that I have configured for this confidential. So these are the 2 labels that I have configured as a compliance admin. Now let's take a look at it as an end user. Logged into my Teams experience. As an investment banker, I'm logged into my investment banking team. And in the Files tab, I can see all the files that are available for me. If you noticed, the sensitivity column is actually available here, right here in the experience as well. If I can zoom it in, I have files that are marked as top secret, as well as I have files that are marked as confidential. So let me go ahead and open one of the top secret file. Within the Teams experience, I can now open these encrypted files. Remember, top secret had an encryption policy, right? So it's an encrypted file. Now I can be able to open it right here in the experience. And not only that, when I opened it, I also noticed that Jeff is also editing this particular file. You can see at the top, that Jeff is actually also in this document. He's inactive right now, but he's also in this document co-authoring with me. So what it shows you is encrypted files are now getting first-class experience in Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. And I know many of you have been waiting for this feature for a long time. I'm glad to announce now it's actually available as the general availability feature. On the other hand, if I go into the header, we go up here and then open the header for this particular file, you can see that top secret is actually embedded as the header for this particular file. Now let's take a look at another file that I have here as the confidential. You can see it's a PowerPoint file. I see confidential available as the header, as the watermark in the file itself. Now let's take it one step further. Let's say I have an encrypted file that is having the code name red zone, and I want to be able to search for that file because I don't know where that actual file is located. So here I'm going to just go type it in red zone. And as you can see, it pulled me up a results that included that particular red zone code name. And if I go ahead and open up that PowerPoint file, and you can see that this file is also labeled as top secret. You can see at the bottom of the screen here. Let me zoom it in for you. And the locked icon tells me that it's an encrypted file. And this particular file is having the watermark top secret as well. So now that's how easy it is. Now the experience for encrypted files across the files ecosystem in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. I hope you love this feature. Now let me switch gear and see the SharePoint home experience, and let's try to create a new site. So here I'm going to try to create a new site collection, and I'm going to pick Team Site as the option. And let's create a bulk manager sites. And as you noticed, as soon as I started typing in the names, and the option available for me right here as a sensitivity label, so that I can decide whether I want to label this as general site, confidential site, M&A legal top secret, or top secret. Also, my admin have conveniently published the guidance on which one label to choose in which particular projects. So this is completely customizable. So as an administrator, you can decide what you want to expose to your end users. So in this case, I'm going to select confidential. And once I select it, as you notice, the privacy option automatically set. Because if you remember, as the label definition, I set that as a private. That's why here it automatically selects the private option the moment I choose the sensitivity label. Now, in the interest of time, I actually have created a site already with this confidential label. As you can see here, investment bankers team with the confidential label. And one thing you can notice is the yellow informational bar that shows up at the top. Because the confidential label has an unmanaged device policy that says limited access only from the web, right? And this particular demo, I'm accessing the site from an unmanaged device, and hence this information is shown to me. And it is telling me that your organization doesn't allow you to download, print, or sync using this unmanaged device. And that means if I go and select a particular file, you can see that there is no option available for me to sync or download that particular file because it is protecting me from taking away the file from the corporate data itself. Would you like to try the sensitivity labels in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams? I'm happy to announce we have sensitivity labels for files in SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams generally available as of May 4th, 2020. And you can learn more at aka.ms/m365 files labels GA. Also, we have made sensitivity labels for teams, sites, and M365 groups, wherein when you create a site or a team, you can now apply the label that's available in public preview. And you can learn more at aka.ms/m365 sites labels. I'm pretty sure as an administrator, you know, end users often forget or neglect to label their sensitive content. No worries, this is where auto classification with sensitivity labels comes and helps you. As you know, we have over 100 sensitive information types to create these auto labeling policies. And you can also use policy simulators to create the rule, run a simulator, see how many files are being picked up. And if you're satisfied with that policy, you can tailor them or tweak them as you think you need. And then once you're satisfied with the results, then you can publish the policy. Now, let's actually take a quick look at how to configure such a rule and how does it end users come to see them too. Here I am again in the M365 Compliance Center as the compliance admin. As you can see, we have a new tab, Auto Labeling And this is the tab wherein you can create auto-labeling policies for your enterprise. In this Contoso Bank Corp tenant, I have created 2 policies and they are in the simulation mode. And I have also created a policy and published them as US Federal Trade Commission consumer rules. Let's take a look at the Social Security policy. And as you can see in this policy, there are 10 items that are matching. 6 of them are in SharePoint and 4 of them are in Exchange. And I have actually go ahead and click on edit so you can see what the rules of these policies are. So you create a name and then you can pick specific Exchange users or SharePoint sites or specific OneDrive accounts. And in this case, I picked just for demo purposes, one specific SharePoint site. And then in the rules for Exchange, I have created an SSN rule, which is Social Security Number rules. In the case of SharePoint files, I have also created a US Social Security Number rules so that if the file contains the Social Security numbers, then it will get automatically labeled as confidential. Here is where you pick which label you want to apply if the file meets those specific rules. And that's it. That's how easy it is to create an auto-labeling policy. And as I said earlier, you always run the policy in the simulation mode. And once you are satisfied, then you publish them. Now, let's take a look at it from end user experience perspective. Here I am in the SharePoint site, Micros Banking Strategies, which was part of that auto-labeling policy configuration. And as you can see, when I hover over the sensitivity label confidential, it tells me that this file has been manually labeled. But on the other hand, if I hover over the top secret, this file has been automatically labeled. And that shows me that automatic labeling policy was in effect, and it identified this file had Social Security numbers or credit card numbers, and it is applied the label top secret to them. I'm glad to announce that auto classification is available in public preview, and you can learn more at aka.ms/SPO auto classification. Now that you have a way to label the files or the site collections and so on, you probably also would want to know how many of those labeled files or unlabeled files that contain sensitive information types are there in my enterprise corpus. And that's where data classification insights comes into play. And this is our effort to give you a full visibility into your enterprise corpus across all the sensitive labeled content and the site collections in your system. Not only in this space, but also in Office 365 audit logs, you can see a full detailed view of labeled items as well. Now let's take a look at it in a demo. Here I am in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center under the Data Classification tab. In this overview, it immediately tells me what are all the sensitive information types used mostly in my content. I can see that credit card numbers are used, the third most used ones. And I can also see that Social Security numbers are being used in the contents as well. Also, I can see the top sensitivity labels applied in the content. Top secret seems to be the topmost sensitivity label that's being applied. I can also see the activities that are based on labels that are detected in my organization as well. Now, on the Content Explorer view, I can see all the files that are labeled based on sensitive information types or sensitivity labels or retention labels. And on the Activity Explorer, I can see the view in a nice visualization view across the days, how many files are being labeled. So for example, on May 14th, I see there are 4 files being labeled. And on the May 16th, 1 file got labeled as well. And I can look at the details at the bottom, specifically on which sites are which files gets labeled or which email get labeled as well. So it gives you a nice view across your enterprise corpus. If I look at the Office 365 audit logs, which I'm sure many of you are already aware of, you can also see the detailed audits of your labeled files. For example, here I have an audit log for apply the sensitivity label to site. So if I click on it, it tells me which specific site, in this case, investment bankers team site got labeled. And if I go for more information, it will tell me exactly what label got added to the site as well. So that's how easy it is as a compliance admin. I get the 360 view of labeled files or labeled sites in my organization. But wait, there is actually more. Data loss prevention policies, DLP for the short term. We have made lots of improvements in that aspect too, both in Teams as well as in SharePoint. Specifically for SharePoint and OneDrive files, you can now treat all the files that are being uploaded as a sensitive file. That means you block external sharing of those files until a DLP runs. And this is a tenant level capability that you can turn on for your organization. Also, for sensitive files, you can now block anonymous access as well. So imagine a scenario where you shared a file anonymously, and then as you are co-authoring and adding content, the file became sensitive. The DLP scan will pick up the file and then now mark that file as blocking for anonymous access furthermore. So that way your sensitive files are not leaking from your organization. And in the context of Teams, we have added DLP support such that when you are in the chat messages, if the sensitive content is getting published, then it will block sending those messages to the receiver. So now let me actually take a look at a quick demo of that. Here I am in the M365 Compliance Center under Data Loss Prevention tab. And I'm going to first take a look at the US Personal Identifiable Information data. As you can see, this policy is targeting the Teams chat and channel messages and is looking for the PII information, and then accordingly it will block the chat messages. Also, I have another DLP policy to block anyone links based on the sensitivity label confidential. Let's actually take a look at this particular policy. So here I have the locations for SharePoint sites and OneDrive accounts selected. And for policy settings, I have configured it such that if the file is labeled as confidential or top secret, then you restrict access to the anonymous link. So that's the DLP rule that I have configured for this policy. Now let's take a look at it, how from the end user experience, these policies will be enforcing them. Here I am in the Teams experience, and as you can see, when I typed in the social security number, I get an alert saying this message was blocked. And this is because this matches the DLP policy that is configured for chat messages, and hence the message is removed from this channel. If I go and click on this particular, what I can do, I can as a user override and provide my justification, or I can inform my admin that this is actually not a sensitive data so that my admin can tailor the DLP policies. Now let's take a look at it from the SharePoint site perspective. So here I am in the microbanking strategy SharePoint site. One of my file has this top secret labeled Excel file. Let me go ahead and click on that and then try to share this with an anonymous user. So go ahead and anonymous. As you can see right here, the anonymous option is actually grayed out. And this is because the DLP policy kicked in and detected that the file has top secret label and disabled the anonymous sharing or even anonymous access as well. Now let's move on to compliance controls. I'm going to start with two major compliance features. One is communication compliance and Multi-Geo is the second one. In the context of communication compliance, as you know, insider risk managing is becoming a top of the concern for the information security professionals. This requires monitoring the communications that happens in your organization, and doing it manually, it's a very resource intensive and expensive operation. This is where communication compliance policies at Microsoft 365 helps you to automate some of these monitoring capabilities. As you can see in this screenshot that I have on the right-hand side, the communication compliance policy automatically detected that Jordan was using offensive languages in the communication in a Teams chat. Now, as a compliance admin, you can get the alerts automatically and you can take appropriate actions. I know many of your organizations have the need for data residency, wherein the corresponding users' data, for example, Australian employees' data, needs to be in the Australian data center. This is where M365 Multi-Geo can help you satisfy this data residency needs. And we have now over 12 satellite locations available for you to select from. Finally, in the compliance space, GDPR, you can meet those needs using our out-of-the-box tools as well. But wait, there is more in the compliance space. What if you have a need to provide segments between two departments in your organization? In this Contoso Bank Corp example, I have investment bankers and advisors, and they have their own corresponding teams and SharePoint experiences that they work with. I need to ensure there is no insider trading happens between these two departments. Investment bankers should not be able to share or collaborate or communicate with the advisors. Similarly, advisors should not be able to communicate and collaborate with the investment bankers. This is very highly regulated industries such as financial, energy, government agencies really need this kind of compliance control. And this is where our information barriers scenario help you. You can now create segments of users in your enterprises, and then you can create information barrier policies between those two segments. Now, let's actually take a look at it in a quick demo. Here I am in the M365 Compliance Center under Information Barrier Policy. I have two segments created, investment banking and advisory. Let's take a look at them. For investment banking, I have created the location is New York and user principal names must match Sesha, Jeremy, or Jeff. You can pick any Azure Active Directory attributes as part of creation of these roles. Now let's take a look at the advisory segment. Here, the same rule, but I have Nikita as part of this segment. Now let's go ahead and create an information barrier policy. I have one created for investment banking and advisory, and I'm going to select blocking the communication and collaboration between the investment bankers and advisors. Let's go ahead and click Save. Now that the policy is saved, let's take a look at it from an end user perspective. In the team's experience, as you can see, I am in the investment bankers team, and this is the one I created as an investment banker, and I'm going to try to add more people to this particular team. So if I go and type in Jeff, as you can see, I can see Jeff McDowell. He's also an investment banker. I can select him. However, if I go and type in Nikita, who happens to be my colleague, but she works in advisories. As you can see, I can't even find her in this experience. This is because information barrier policy is in enforcement. It knows that the team is associated for investment bankers and hence doesn't let me add Nikita, who is the advisors in this particular team. Let's take a look at it from SharePoint side perspective. Here, the SharePoint side that is banking the investment bankers, and I have a file, financial forecast, that I wanted to share. And if I click on share and then type in, let's say, Jeff McDowell, I can see him, I can select him. But if I try to share with Nikita, I can't even see her in this particular people picker experience because it knows that the site, SharePoint site, is associated with investment bankers and there is an information barrier policy in place, and hence I can't see her. You see how easy it was to create information segments, create policies between them, and then your end users are now protected from accidentally sharing the highly regulated content with the inappropriate persons. In the roadmap, I have placed them in two major categories. What are the features that are available now through summer and the features that are coming towards the end of this calendar year 2020. Features that are available now through summer: sensitivity labels for Teams sites. It's available as preview. It's going to be GAing this summer. Sensitivity labels with protection for files. It's already GA'd. Auto classification with sensitive labels is available in public preview. It's going to go into GA very soon. Then DLP block external access by default for files is also GA'd for SharePoint. DLP in Teams is also available as a GA. From a compliance point of view, the communication compliance multi-geo capabilities that I showed you are available as GA. The information barrier policy is available as a private preview, and it will be GAing this summer. Oh, one additional thing, global reader role in SharePoint. This is one of our recent announcements we made as the general available feature, meaning you can now have global admins who have just read access to the settings in SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. They don't have full access to everything. This is one of the many asks. I know many of you have been asking for this. Now let's switch to the end of the calendar year features. The co-authoring that I showed you works for the Office Online, and we are working with the Office Rich client, bring the co-authoring to support to that as well. That plans to be going to preview by end of the year. Also, the multi-factor authentication policy at the site collection level. For example, imagine you can have a top secret site and you want to add or you want to require multi-factor authentication for those sites and teams. Those are capabilities coming towards the end of the year as a preview. And also we have another advanced feature, instant session revocations. You can revoke a session in the Azure Active Directory, then all the services across Microsoft 365 will honor that particular revocation. Expiring permissions for external users. This is another item we are working on. It's available in preview now. We're looking to GA that this year. And then finally, the DLP block anonymous access for sensitive files. It's available in private preview. It's going to be available as GA towards the end of the year. Now, I know this is a lot, but you can just go to this one URL, aka.ms/m365 security corner, and we have all this information captured for you right there and the corresponding articles that talks about individual features as well. So I want to finish with a call to action. Please check out the security and compliance resources for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams at aka.ms/m365 security corner. And also, if you are interested in the previews that I mentioned throughout this session, You can nominate yourself or your customers at aka.ms/ODSP security previews. With that, I wanted to thank you for your time today for listening into this session, and I hope you really enjoyed it. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Galactic Collaboration Summit. Join the community and meet in-person world-class Microsoft and MVP speakers this autumn in Wiesbaden, Frankfurt, Germany, with 15 full-day tutorials and over 150 Microsoft 365 and Azure sessions at the combined European Collaboration Summit and European Cloud Summit from 26 to 28 October 2020. Community rocks.